Monday morning dawned very much as Sunday had. Beautiful day, very calm seas, and by this time we'd pretty much crossed the Bay of Biscay and we're heading out into the Atlantic proper, down to go out towards Madeira. We needed an early start today because we'd got to go up to the buffet for breakfast, because we'd booked a behind-the-scenes tour. For that, we needed to be in the Arena Theatre for 8:45. I can't show you anything of this because phones, cameras, even ladies' handbags were forbidden. And it lasted for 3 hours. So it was a great shame because it was a fantastic tour. Only 10 people on it. And really, although it's expensive, it was 80-something pounds each, we thought that it was extremely good value for money, and we'd definitely recommend anybody to do it if you have the chance. We started off in the theatre, unsurprisingly. We went up onto the stage and we were shown things like the lift and what have you, which allows performers and kit to come up from under the stage. It doesn't demonstrate it. We were shown where it was and told how it worked. We then went backstage, and it was organised chaos is the only way you could sensibly put it. And the stage manager who was taking us around said that there's no way that you can have anybody who is not involved in a production behind the scenes, because some of the costume changes are something like 10 seconds. And although the clothes are designed to allow that, you've still got to do it, and you've still got to get to where your gear is and get changed. So he said it's absolutely insane when they're doing that. And it's not unknown for people to bang into each other and somebody to end up with a bleeding nose. So he said, we've got all that to do. And then they do have contingencies. So if something like that happens and they're one person short, they know how to pick up the routines. The number of shoes they need for all the productions, for the number of people they've got, is absolutely amazing. As it is, the costumes for the productions that they're doing in the next few days, there's a rack which goes up, believe it or not, 3 entire decks, which is as high as things like lighting galleries go as well. So he did apologise for people who were on the deck, 3 decks above the theatre. Probably that would be deck 9, the deck we were on. Because he said, sooner or later you're going to hear people clattering about and moving stuff as we get ready. And the thing is, the cast changes at regular intervals. They don't all get off, but fundamentally you've constantly got people who are coming and going. Yes, they all, in some senses, know the productions. They'll have practiced them ashore before they come out to the ship. But they've got to then learn to work with the rest of the company, adjust their own costumes, because they're responsible for all the repairs needed to their own costumes, and things like that. The logistics of it just blow my mind. The next place we went to was one of those that I found absolutely fascinating, because I had some knowledge of what they were doing. This was the port forward mooring deck, which is where the lines, or one of the 6 places on the ship, where the lines are sent from, and also where, in this case, the anchors are kept, which I'll come to in a minute. It was very interesting because people were asking about the breaking strain of the hawser that moors the ship to the dock, and he was saying that it comes in actually in 3 parts. There's the main rope, which is about 110 tons breaking strain. There's the loop which goes around the bollard, which has to be replaced fairly regularly because it gets worn, unsurprisingly. And that's about 100 tons breaking strain. And then you've got the splice, which brings the 2 together, and that's about 105. So it's quite unlikely that the actual rope, hawser, whatever you want to call it, itself is going to break. If anything parts, it's likely to be the loop. Somebody asked, what was the weakest part of it after that? He said, what was it, the loop or what? And he said, no, actually, silly as it sounds, although we put several mooring lines on a bollard on one bollard at some ports, the bollard is the weakest link. He said, and some bollards are only about 50 tons. So in the event of anything going wrong, you can end up actually tearing the bollard straight out of the dock side. Something I found particularly interesting was that the modern ship's mooring lines are made of a very low elasticity plastic. And I find this interesting because a long time ago, so getting on for nearly 50 years ago now, I worked in a part of the coal board which tested components to go underground. And as part of that, we had a machine which tested winding ropes for colliery cages and what have you. But we also were contracted by manufacturers to test ship's mooring lines. Now, normally, when they did this, you put the section of rope into the machine and you put covers over the top, and you could stand in there. There was an almighty bang when it broke because it was a 500-ton test machine. But that was fine. If you were doing a ship's mooring line, you couldn't do that. You had to have no covers on. You had to set it going and leave. Nobody was allowed to be in that building when that rope broke. It might only be about 10 feet long, but nobody was allowed to be in the building because the amount of energy, the amount of stretch that rope made before it broke was considerable. And the problem there is that all that, just like a spring, all that stored energy's got to go somewhere. So this is the main difference now, that when one of these ropes breaks, there's not a lot of stored energy there. So it's much safer than it used to be. Something with a lot of power breaking and flying around and snaking, it can kill people. I've heard stories of that where a mooring line's broke and just basically cut somebody in half, literally. Sorry about that, but it's true. Something which I think most of us would not expect, unless you've been on one of these tours before, is that anchors don't anchor. Which sounds completely counterintuitive. And we all went, what? And he said, no. He said the pin, which is apparently the naval slang for them, only holds in place a point from which they then lay the anchor chain onto the seabed. And it's the weight of the anchor chain which holds the ship in place, not the anchor, because the the actual hooks on the anchor are not that strong. They only need to be strong enough to just hold it in place while the chain comes down behind it. And those chains are big. And he was saying that they very, very, very rarely use anchor chains anymore. And it means that they basically go into the chain locker and very rarely come out between dry docks. The next thing was the main control room. And I was absolutely in my element there as an engineer. They control basically all the equipment on the ship. From down there, the obvious bit, there's the engines and generators and all that kind of thing. But there's also lots of other stuff. There's things like the wastewater control system, both the grey water, things like showers and sinks and washing up water and stuff like that, and then the sewage water, which has got to be treated something differently. And even things like the aircon units, which are also used to chill brine, which is used to keep the cold stores cool. It's an amazing thing. They gave us at the end of the visit this, which is a little handout with all sorts of stuff on it, and on the back of it is some interesting things. Although for me it was things like, somebody said, could we ever actually go and see the engines? And they were saying, no, it's just too dangerous. By the time we got everybody kitted up with steel toe-cap boots and overalls and safety lines and helmets and goodness only knows what else, the tour would be over. The engines can be something like 3 decks high. They've got 6 engines. They've got 4 V12s and 2 straight 8s. They mechanically are identical. So each piston is 480 millimeters in diameter, with a stroke of, pardon me, where are we? Sorry about that. But the engines are huge. Here we are. Sorry, as you can see, I've prepared really well. The main engines, yeah, they are 460 millimeter bore, which is just about 18.5 inches in old money, with a stroke of 580 mil, which is about what's that, about 35 inches? Something like, no, 47 inches, very nearly 2 feet. So that's a big lump to be going up and down. The main engines are 16,900 horsepower, and the 8-cylinder engines, the inline 8s, are 11,300. They drive alternators, which produce 3-phase 11,000 volts AC at 60 hertz, and they supply power to the ship, both to the motors that drive the propellers and all the auxiliaries. And just to give you an idea of the amount of power that these things use, in port, with nothing else going on, just in port, all the auxiliaries require 11,000 kilowatts. Even when it's tied up alongside. So, interesting stuff. They also, about every 2 weeks, put $1 million US worth of fuel in the ship. because these things use 96 gallons of fuel to cover a mile at 18 knots, which amounts to 4.2 meters per litre. Yeah, fascinating. When he was describing the process of changing equipment, they're doing a full overhaul of an engine and changing an alternator. And by the time we'd finished telling us all about that, I wanted a pair of overalls and a spanner to go downstairs and give him a hand. But that was a fascinating process. The next thing we saw, very briefly, that we didn't go inside, but from the outside, was the crew mess rooms, and the fact that there were officers' mess and men's mess. Not just because of the class system, but simply because of the way the two types of crew operate. The food's very much the same for each one, although there are some variations because of nationality ratios, shall we call them. Then we went into one of the galleys for cinnamon, because cinnamon doesn't operate except at dinner time. And it's a massive space. And people were working in there, making bread rolls. The number of bread rolls they make every day, you'd never guess it in a million years. It's a ridiculous number when you consider how many people there are on the ship, though. Both, passengers and crew. 3 meals a day. Somebody's going to want some bread, and it's all made fresh. The only ones they don't make are croissant and pain au chocolat, because with that millefeuille pastry, that flaky pastry that they're made from, it's just too much trouble to make. Things like soup, it's thousands of litres of soup a day. I mean, I make soup for us in single litres in the shape of a jug kettle. They've got something that's 3 feet diameter and about the same deep. Absolutely astonishing. But there are 152 people, although there were actually 5 short on this voyage, who work 2 12-hour shifts in the galley. So one shift is basically producing, and the other is clean down, sterilisation, and prep. So there's a lot goes on behind the scenes that we don't see as passengers. We can only moan about it when it doesn't come up to our expectations. From the galleys, we went to storage. And this was where it got quite interesting, because the chap that was showing us around here was saying he needs to know sometime in advance things like special diets, so he can order appropriate food, and passenger numbers within a fairly close limit, because the logistics of getting the amount of food you need for 2 weeks for a full ship, plus crew, and that is something like 4,000 people, I think. It's quite an exercise, because you've got to talk to the chefs, you've got to decide what the menus are going to be, order the food appropriately, allow a bit for spoilage and all this kind of thing, which is all understood. But you've got, I think he said, 6 cool storage rooms for things like hard fruit, like melons and that kind of thing. And he opened the doors to one, and you would struggle to get past the door. You'd have to stand sideways and shuffle. And he said, we've got six of these. He said, and by the time we get back to Southampton, there'll be, to all intents and purposes, nothing left. And we'll then start again for the next cruise. And then he took us very briefly, thank goodness, across the other side of the main corridor, because now we were well into the crew area and we're in the that part where you've got the long corridor. Some people got an M1 and this kind of thing, but basically it's the corridor that runs the full length of the ship that the crew used to get around for the most part. And on the other side of that were the chilled storage for all the frozen stuff, and these are kept at -20 all the time. And again, he opened the door, and really it's just this vast area of frozen food. And again, he said the same sort of thing. By the time we get back to Southampton, this will be gone. As we came towards the end of the tour, we actually moved out onto the prom deck, on deck 7, I think it was. And we went past the cupboards where the spare life jackets are held. And we got a trick question. And again, it's one that you'd never think about it if you weren't aware. He said, how many types of life jacket do you think we carry? It's a matter of routine. We went, oh, 2, surely, adults and kids. He said, no, it's 3, because they actually carry life jackets for service dogs. If you go on with a CNI dog or some such, there will be a life jacket provided for your dog. And then we went up to the bridge, and this was the last place we actually saw. Great fun. The guys have obviously got quite a good relationship. There was a lot of banter and bouncing around between the various officers. But the curious thing was, although they've got all kinds of modern equipment, GPS and autopilot and sonar and, you name it, they've got it. There are 2 guys up there all the time, just stood there, or sat there, with binoculars scanning the horizon. And that's pretty much so that they don't hit things like whales and porpoises, because the whales won't get out of the way. And by international, I don't know if it's law or just custom and practice, you don't smack into whales and porpoises, dolphins, unless it's absolutely unavoidable. And most of the time you'll see them some distance off. So any kind of obstruction, whether it's natural or floating objects, bits of flotsam perhaps, or as some people have seen on occasion, life boats that have got detached from ships somehow or other. Anything like that, the old number 1 eyeball is still the best thing. So really enjoyed ourselves, and told the captain just how much we enjoyed it, which he was pleased about, obviously. We went down to Sindhu, where we were supposed to be provided with snacks and a drink. Snacks, goodness gracious me. For 10 people, they laid on an absolute feast of finger food. And it was really good, and you could get alcoholic drinks, or you could get soft drinks and what have you. Really well done, lovely food, great stuff. And as I say, not a cheap tour, but I definitely do. Whether I do it on Ventura or a sister Azura, again, I don't know. But certainly if you go on Iona, apparently you see the laundry. You don't see the laundry on Ventura because it's too small. But on Iona, the galley, the layout of the galley is such that you can't go through there as easily as you can on Ventura. So you go and do the laundry instead. And the laundry on Ventura, just, you couldn't do it. You couldn't take 10 people through it. It's just too small and cramped. So that was that. It took a good 3 hours and was absolutely brilliant value for money. Can't fault it. After eating all that food in Sindhu, we really needed a walk around the deck. We certainly didn't need any lunch. So inevitably we gravitated towards the stern of the ship, and who doesn't love standing on the stern and just watching the wake disappear over the sea. On the way back we walked through Tamarind, or past Tamarind, and saw what rapidly became one of our favourite duos on the ship. This is the South African couple Big Man and Bear, who are absolutely brilliant. In the evening we had dinner in the beach house, and that's part of the buffet area, which is cordoned off in the evenings. And the food was extremely good. We were very pleased with it, especially as it's one of the cheaper speciality restaurants. It was about £15 or £16, something like that. And we thought it was very much worth the money. The staff were very good, very polite, very friendly and welcoming. They gave us a lovely table right by the window and took this lovely photograph of the two of us while we were in there, which was a really nice gesture. We both started off with the potato skins, which were absolutely brilliant. No grumbles there at all. I then had this great big pile of nachos, which was something I very, very rarely eat and thoroughly enjoyed. Ruth had the salmon, which came wrapped in paper, or en papillote as the French call it. So that's it as it arrived. And this is after she'd unpacked it, with the salmon cooked in its own juices with the lemon on top, and she really enjoyed that one. She finished up with a fudge cake with ice cream, or cream, I can't tell which it was, but very good. I had this sizzling banana split. It came on one of those cast iron bowls that are heated in the oven, so the ice cream didn't last long, but boy oh boy, it was good. After that we went down to the Arena Theatre and watched Phil Hitchcock do his magic illusion show. He was a good entertainer, but we weren't ever so impressed by his magic. And then it was time to go back to the prom deck, have another wander round. Last thing, again, back to the stern where we could watch the sun starting to go down. And before long, we were starting to think about heading upstairs, going and getting a hot chocolate or something like that. But here's some of the stair art, which you'll see more of in the next video. And this is the little board about the artist who did it all. So thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.